Switching gears again today, back to the topic of reading. We have an upcoming course on reading assessment coming up in January 2024. And we just completed track 1, which is the theory of the reading course. And I thought, let me spend some time to explain this to you today, because probably reading is the one that's the least understood by my regular audience, as to why should an OT be interested in the reading piece. Actually, the one that just passes reading and written expression, right? Looking at both aspects, as the research is now saying that teaching reading and writing together is absolutely paramount, as they utilize many similar pathways in the brain and can really support each other. But reading, the interest that I have in reading as an OT is that reading is not a skill that we're born with. It's an acquired skill. It is a place of support that we have based on how our nervous system develops. So reading is a later invention in our history in humankind. It's not something that was there all the time. So we use existing networks in the brain to get to the process of reading, which is a wonderful invention. I don't know what I would have done without it. It creates a whole new world for us in order for us to communicate and in order for us to also expand our minds. So my interest as an OT is what developmental building blocks is necessary for us to look at as to why a child is struggling to read in school. And then the educator can take the job further in doing the educational problem-solving piece that says, okay, this is what the child is having difficulty with. It's a two-prong approach. It's not just education, it's also developmental. So if we look at the definition of reading, the action, it's a skill, right, of reading written. I have to understand what's written. There's a symbol there that I have to associate with a certain sound. Printed matter, silently or aloud. That's reading. So as the research also says, is that reading aloud is a much better precursor for good reading proficiency later. Building vocabulary skill, another one. So what happens then? What's the symptoms that comes up when a student is really struggling with reading? They don't like reading aloud. They don't like that piece of listening to themselves, going over the words. They may be slow. The reading may be very labor intensive. You almost feel for the child as they labor over the words and try to figure out what does this word mean, as well as writing. They also have problems with spelling. Activities that involve reading, any activities involving reading. And then you have these agile minds, these minds that are just so beautiful, intelligent, but they cannot put it to paper. They cannot put it, they can't glean it from reading. They won't pick up a book to read for interest. And you know that it's so beautiful to expand your mind to a different country, to a different plot, to a whodunit, to a description of a beautiful landscape. And it's just so much beauty that comes from visualizing while we're reading. But therein lies a problem, is that when children struggle to read, they just cannot figure out the magic of reading. So for me as an OT, what I was seeing in my office was I would get the kids to do beautifully well on sensory integration tests. We used to do the SIPT, the SIPT test for integration for many years, before and after, and we could see how the SIPT was coming together. And I would be so proud and show the parent. And the parent says, Maude, it's true. My child is better regulated. My child is doing better with sports. My child is doing better on so many arenas, but they do not want to read. And for me, that was not acceptable. Needed to figure out why, if reading was an acquired skill in the brain and not pre-wired, it means that it must depend on the developmental pathways in order to get that to myelination. Why? What is the missing link? And this drove me to many, many trainings in reading, being the only OT on educating courses and things like that, and pretty fun. And I learned a lot from my education colleagues, learning like, what is it that we need to do and to get there? And so when I got to this place, and this is where I want for you to understand and why I want to plug the assessment course coming up, it's because I want others to also get this, because we have helped so many kids to read by using this combined developmental approach with speech language pathology, with education. And again, it's a village, just like in autism, just like in anything else. It's not just one thing. We have to open our minds. So for us, we first look at the building hierarchy for us to look at, can the child use the visual and auditory system together in order to decode the words? Keith Rayner's research says that you have to almost do about 18 letters in the periphery for a letter recognition span for one saccadic eye movement. And then as soon as your eyes fixate, within about 5 to 20 milliseconds, your phonics needs to kick in. There's a timing between those two systems that's necessary, right? So we need a visual system and we need an auditory system, and we need to time them together. We need to see what that looks like. We need to process the information at a certain speed. What is the timing and the speed of the nervous system to get it through that beautiful high-speed pathway that Sally Shaywitz talked about in her book, Overcoming Dyslexia? The praxis. You would say, what has praxis got to do with reading? Well, praxis is a building block for working memory. It's how I'm using my systems together in order to problem solve and to get to comprehension, right? So if I'm using all of my working memory to decode the letters, what am I using when I'm comprehending the letters, right? So you want to make the reading decoding automatic so comprehension can be fully available to the full capacity of working memory. Well, working memory needs timing to develop, where the praxis piece comes in, especially the bilateral part of praxis, which causes the two hemispheres to also bilaterally work together, left and right brain. The right brain is so awesome for comprehension and the emotional content and the narrative of the story and following it, while the left brain is so beautiful for the decoding, for the sequence of everything in a certain order, and how I'm going to plan to write my essay, and how am I going to spell my words. You need both brains to operate together. That's where praxis comes in, with a bilateral piece. You need ideation. I need to visualize when I'm reading. When I'm reading that the blonde girl was standing at the green bus stop waiting for the red bus to come around the corner, I can picture that. The words are telling me it's a green bus stop. It's a blonde lady. It's a red bus. It's giving me that detail. Then the next sentence says, it's a cold and wintry day. Now my brain has to think, is she wearing a coat? Is she wearing a hat, gloves? She's not wearing a shorts. So my picture gets filled up by the innuendo of that next sentence that is not clear exactly what that picture should look like. I need to fill it in. I need to visualize that. Well, where does visualization come from? As per the research, from visual spatial and object constancy, which is both of them usually developmental, and can be so difficult for kids in comprehension if we don't have this. Sequencing and timing. I think we already talked about that. I must do everything in a certain sequence and timing. Otherwise, I'm not going to comprehend in a logical way, and I'm not going to be able to time myself as I'm reading across the page, as one aspect of timing. Language. We need language, right? That's where our speech language pathologist also comes in so beautifully. They're bringing in their descriptors. They're bringing making vocabulary come alive, and the application of that to pragmatic speech and writing an essay. Working memory. We need working memory. Working memory is fed by two streams of information, visual and auditory. That's how neuropsychologists test IQ, working memory in IQ tests. So it depends on, can I use my visual system to its optimal ability? Can I use my auditory system to its optimal ability? It's not one or the other. They need to come together for working memory. I want to leave you with that. I want you to think about that. I want you to ponder about that. It's not enough to tell a child, you know, if we can just get you by and get you through high school, you're going to be fine one day. We as a professional group need to come together and talk more around the table and bring that about in a much more pristine way as to what is the full complement of services needed to actually make a huge difference. We must think out of the box, and we must think in a way that can enhance the full total person in front of you. Not let them fit in a box. We have to get out of our box and talk to each other as professions and not have this dividing line. You do this and I do that. We got to come together. The course is on my website, maudelarue.com. So the next track is on assessment. And then the third track will be on intervention, how to get there, right? I'm not going to leave you hanging, but we do need to assess, because the assessment will tell us where to go and where we need to go first in order to get the most original point that we can move the building blocks forward. Okay? Until next time, take care.